Nobody survives a storm like that. Ryan Carter said it to himself as he stared at the blinking signal on the rescue scanner. Outside the station windows, the blizzard swallowed everything. Sheets of ice crystals slammed against reinforced glass hard enough to make the entire structure tremble. Visibility had dropped to less than 20 feet. Winds exceeded 100 miles per hour. The frozen world beyond the outpost had vanished beneath a wall of white. Yet the scanner insisted it was detecting a life sign. Ryan frowned and adjusted the display. The signal flickered weakly across the map. One biological signature. Approximately 3 miles north of the station. Barely alive. He checked the reading twice. Then a third time. The result remained unchanged. You have got to be kidding me. No settlements existed in that direction. No mining camps. No research facilities. Nothing but frozen wilderness stretching hundreds of miles across the frontier. Whoever was out there should not have been alive. 10 minutes later, Ryan guided his rescue crawler through the storm. Floodlights struggled to cut through the swirling snow. The vehicle groaned as ice accumulated across its armored frame. The heater blasted warm air into the cabin while warning indicators flashed along the dashboard. Ryan kept one eye on the scanner and the other on the terrain ahead. The signal continued moving slightly. Not enough to suggest walking. Just enough to prove whoever it belonged to was still breathing. The crawler finally reached the coordinates. Ryan stepped outside immediately. The cold struck like a physical force. Ice crystals stung exposed skin. Wind howled across the frozen landscape. He activated his helmet lights and scanned the area. At first he saw nothing except snow. Then a faint metallic reflection caught his attention. Half buried beneath a drift. Ryan hurried forward. The shape slowly emerged from the storm. A person. An alien woman lay partially covered by ice and snow. What remained of her armor looked heavily damaged. Sections were cracked. Several identification markings had been scraped away entirely. Her face was pale beneath a layer of frost. Golden hair spilled across the snow. Ryan immediately knelt beside her. Hey. No response. He checked for vital signs. Weak. Extremely weak. But present. Relief washed through him. Good. Stay with me. He carefully brushed away accumulated ice. The woman remained unconscious. Yet, even in that condition, something about her felt unusual. The scars on the armor suggested military service. The design itself was unlike anything Ryan recognized. Advanced. Expensive. Important. None of that mattered. Not right now. Right now, she was simply someone who needed help. Ryan activated a portable medical scanner. The device emitted a soft tone. Severe exhaustion. Hypothermia. Multiple untreated injuries. The results made him shake his head. How are you still alive? The storm offered no answer. He lifted her carefully and carried her toward the crawler. Snow swirled around them. Somewhere beyond the blizzard, distant thunder echoed through the mountains. Ryan secured her inside the heated cabin and closed the hatch. Warm air filled the compartment. Frost slowly melted from the edges of her damaged armor. The scanner beside her continued tracking a fragile heartbeat. Ryan glanced toward the unknown woman one last time before turning the vehicle back toward the station. He believed he was bringing home a wounded stranger. He had no idea that half the Empire was already searching for her. The storm continued raging outside long after Ryan returned to the rescue station. Ice hammered against reinforced walls. Wind screamed across the frozen plains. The entire structure trembled occasionally beneath the force of the weather. Inside the small medical bay, however, warmth slowly pushed back the cold. Ryan carefully removed sections of damaged armor while medical scanners floated above the unconscious alien woman. Streams of blue data moved across transparent displays. Her condition remained serious. Not critical anymore. Just serious. You are stubborn, Ryan muttered while reviewing the readings. I will give you that. The scanner emitted another soft tone. Body temperature rising. Vital signs stabilizing. Ryan allowed himself a small smile. That was progress. He stepped away long enough to prepare nutrient fluids and update the station logs. The report itself was simple. One unidentified alien female recovered during a severe storm. No identification. No active distress beacon. No known affiliation. The lack of information bothered him. Normally, travelers carried some form of registration. A ship transponder. A military code. A civilian network profile. This woman had nothing. It was almost as though someone wanted her identity erased. Ryan glanced through the observation window, separating the medical bay from the main control room. Snow continued swirling through the darkness outside. Whatever had happened to her began far beyond the reach of his station. For now, that mystery could wait. Several hours later, the woman moved for the first time. The motion was subtle, a slight shift of one hand. Then another. Ryan immediately returned to the bedside. "Easy," he said. "You are safe." Violet eyes opened instantly. Alert. Focused. Dangerous. Ryan had seen injured soldiers wake up before. Most required a moment to understand where they were. This woman seemed aware of everything immediately. Her gaze swept across the room. Exits. Equipment. Windows. Distances. Evaluating. Calculating. Ryan recognized the behavior at once. Military training. Advanced military training. "You are in a rescue station," he said calmly. "About 12 miles from where I found you." The woman tried to sit up. Pain stopped her almost immediately. She ignored it. "How long?" Her voice sounded rough from dehydration. "About 8 hours." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I need to leave." Ryan actually laughed. "Absolutely not." That response clearly surprised her. "You do not understand. I understand you nearly froze to death in a blizzard." Ryan pointed toward the scanner. "And according to my medical equipment, you are not going anywhere." The woman stared at him. Ryan stared back. Silence filled the room. Finally, she looked away first. "You should not have brought me here." "Probably. There may be consequences." "There are always consequences." That answer seemed to confuse her. For several moments, she simply watched him. Ryan noticed more details now. The scars visible along sections of her damaged armor. The unusual materials woven into the suit. The faint symbols etched into the metal beneath layers of frost damage. Everything about her suggested someone important. Someone dangerous. Yet lying in a medical bed beneath warm blankets, she looked less like a threat and more like a person who had been carrying too much for too long. Outside, the storm continued howling across the frozen wilderness. Inside, neither of them realized that several ships had just entered orbit above the planet, and all of them were searching for the same woman. The woman spent most of the next day trying to leave. Ryan spent most of the next day stopping her. The pattern repeated itself with remarkable consistency. She would wait until he stepped into the control room. Then she would attempt to stand. The medical scanner would immediately protest. Ryan would return. She would pretend nothing had happened. By the fourth attempt, neither of them bothered hiding it. "You are impossible," Ryan said while adjusting a diagnostic display. "I have been called worse." The answer arrived so quickly that Ryan almost smiled. Almost. The storm outside had finally weakened. Pale sunlight filtered through layers of cloud and illuminated the frozen plains beyond the station. The endless white landscape stretched toward distant mountain ranges, silent and untouched. Inside the rescue station, however, the atmosphere remained tense. The woman still refused to provide a name. She refused to discuss where she came from. She refused to explain how she ended up alone in the middle of nowhere wearing damaged military armor. Yet every now and then she revealed something without realizing it. A comment about orbital strategy. A correction regarding navigation routes. Knowledge no ordinary traveler should possess. Ryan noticed every detail. He simply chose not to push. "You ask fewer questions than most people," she said unexpectedly. Ryan looked up from his workstation. "Is that a complaint?" "An observation. I figured if you wanted to tell me something, you would." The woman studied him carefully. "And if I never do?" Ryan shrugged. "Then you are still the person I dragged out of a snowstorm." Silence followed. Not hostile silence. Thoughtful silence. The scanner continued monitoring her recovery while warm air circulated through the station. Somewhere overhead, communication satellites crossed the sky. Life moved forward. Eventually, the woman shifted her attention toward the observation window. "Why do you live here?" Ryan followed her gaze. "Because someone has to." "That is not an answer." "Sure it is." He leaned back in his chair. "Most people avoid frontier worlds. They are cold, isolated, dangerous. Which means when something goes wrong, help can be very far away." The woman listened quietly. "So you stay?" "Somebody should." Her expression became difficult to read. Ryan had noticed that look before. It appeared whenever she was comparing his answers against expectations he could not see. "Among my people," she said slowly, "few would choose such a life. Among humans, we have entire professions built around bad decisions." To his surprise, The corner of her mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. Close enough. A warning tone suddenly echoed through the station. Both of them turned toward the main console. Ryan immediately stood and crossed the room. The sensor network had detected new arrivals in orbit. Several ships. Large ships. Their transponders remained encrypted. Expecting company? The woman asked. Ryan frowned. Not out here. The orbital display updated again. Additional vessels appeared. Then more. Too many for a routine visit. The room grew very quiet. Ryan glanced toward the woman. For the first time since she woke up, genuine concern crossed her face. Not fear. Recognition. As though she already knew exactly who those ships belonged to. And for the first time, Ryan began wondering if the mysterious stranger in his medical bay was far more important than she appeared. The ships remained in orbit for the next 2 days. Ryan monitored them constantly. Every few hours he checked the sensor arrays, hoping for some explanation. None arrived. The vessels never contacted the station. They never transmitted identification codes. They simply remained above the planet like silent shadows. Whatever their purpose, it had nothing to do with a remote rescue outpost. Or at least that was what Ryan kept telling himself. The woman clearly disagreed. Since the ships appeared, she had become even more restless. Recovery continued faster than expected. Her strength returned daily. She spent less time resting and more time standing near the observation windows studying the horizon. Sometimes Ryan caught her examining orbital trajectories displayed on the station monitors. Other times she would simply stare into the distance, lost in thought. You know something about those ships, Ryan said one evening. The woman remained silent. Snow drifted outside beneath a sky filled with pale starlight. That was not a question. Still no response. Ryan sighed and returned to reviewing sensor logs. The silence stretched for several minutes before she finally spoke. If I tell you, your situation becomes more dangerous. Ryan looked up. That is the closest thing to an explanation I have received all week. Her violet eyes reflected the monitor light. Then consider yourself fortunate. Ryan shook his head. You know, most people say thank you when someone drags them out of a snowstorm. For the first time, genuine surprise crossed her face. Then something even stranger happened. She smiled. Very briefly, very faintly. But it was there. Most people do not argue with me. I am starting to suspect that. The smile disappeared almost immediately, though not before Ryan noticed it. Outside the station, the wind had finally calmed. The endless white wilderness stretched beneath a sky crowded with stars. The storm that nearly killed her felt distant now. Yet the tension inside the station continued growing. The next morning, Ryan entered the medical bay carrying breakfast and stopped abruptly. The bed was empty. Panic hit him immediately. Then he noticed movement near the equipment lockers. The woman stood there examining the remains of her damaged armor. You are supposed to be resting. I have rested. That is not how recovery works. She ignored the comment and continued studying the armor fragments. Ryan walked closer. For the first time, he noticed details hidden beneath the damage. Strange markings. Symbols carved into the metal. Some appeared ceremonial. Others looked military. One insignia had been partially destroyed, but not completely erased. Ryan frowned. What does that symbol mean? The woman immediately covered it with part of the armor plating. Too quickly. Too deliberately. Ryan noticed. So did she. For several seconds, neither moved. Then a warning tone echoed through the station. Both turned toward the main console. A transmission request had appeared. Origin unknown. Priority level maximum. Ryan crossed the room and activated the channel. Static filled the speakers. Then a voice emerged. Calm. Professional. To all personnel on the surface. This is an official military operation. We are searching for an individual of strategic importance. If located, do not attempt to interfere. Ryan slowly looked toward the woman. She stared at the transmission display without speaking. The silence that followed told him more than any answer could have. Whoever she was, the people in orbit were not searching for an ordinary traveler. After the transmission ended, the station felt smaller. The silence lingered in the control room long after the speakers went quiet. Ryan stared at the display while encrypted military codes continued scrolling across the screen. Strategic importance. The phrase repeated in his mind. He slowly turned toward the woman. She remained standing beside the damaged armor, her expression unreadable. You knew they were looking for you. It was not an accusation, just a fact. The woman looked toward the observation window. Beyond the glass, the frozen wilderness stretched beneath a pale sky. Yes. Ryan folded his arms. That would have been useful information. It would not have changed anything. Maybe not. He paused. But it would have answered a few questions. For several seconds, neither spoke. The medical bay hummed softly around them. Diagnostic equipment continued monitoring her recovery. Outside, the storm was gone. Bright sunlight reflected across endless fields of snow and ice. The world looked peaceful. The atmosphere inside the station did not. Finally, the woman stepped closer to the window. "Among my people," she said quietly, "trust is earned slowly." Ryan leaned against the nearest console. "That sounds familiar." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You are not angry." "Should I be?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. Ryan shrugged. "You never lied to me. You just refused to answer questions." A faint expression crossed her face. Something between confusion and respect. Most would not make that distinction. Most people did not drag you out of a blizzard. For the first time in hours, the tension eased slightly. The woman glanced away, almost as though she did not know how to respond. Ryan noticed something then. Every time the conversation became personal, she seemed less comfortable than when discussing military matters. That alone told him a great deal. Later that evening, Ryan entered the maintenance area carrying replacement components for a weather sensor array. He expected to work alone. Instead, he found the woman already there. She stood beside a partially disassembled generator, studying the equipment. "Please tell me you are not trying to repair that." She looked up. "Why?" "Because it took me 3 hours to take apart." Her gaze moved across the exposed machinery. "The coolant regulator is misaligned." Ryan blinked. "Excuse me." She pointed toward a specific component. "There." Ryan crouched beside the generator. 10 seconds later, he realized she was right. The adjustment solved a problem he had been chasing all morning. He slowly stood and stared at her. "How did you know that?" The woman immediately regretted answering. He could see it in her expression. "Experience," she said. "That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting." Ryan laughed despite himself. The sound surprised both of them. As the days passed, moments like that became more common. She never revealed her identity. She never explained the ships. Yet pieces of her story kept slipping through the cracks. She knew military technology from multiple civilizations. She recognized tactical symbols used by fleets thousands of light years away. Once she corrected an orbital calculation so quickly that Ryan nearly dropped his datapad. None of it fit together. Not yet. But one thing became increasingly clear. Whoever she was far more than a stranded traveler. And despite every reason to remain distant, she had stopped trying to leave the station. For reasons Ryan could not explain, he found himself glad about that. The ships finally moved on the 6th day. Ryan noticed the change during an early morning systems check. The orbital display that had been crowded with encrypted contacts now showed motion. One by one, the vessels adjusted course and began leaving high orbit. Their engines ignited like distant stars against the darkness. Within an hour, most were gone. Whatever search had brought them here appeared to be ending. Ryan expected relief. Instead, he found the woman standing motionless before the observation window. Her expression was difficult to read. "Good news," he said. "Looks like your mysterious friends are leaving." She did not answer immediately. The pale light of dawn reflected across the snowfields outside. Finally she spoke. "That means they failed." Ryan frowned. "You say that like it is a bad thing." The woman looked away from the window. "Sometimes failure creates new problems." Before Ryan could ask what that meant, a warning indicator flashed across the main console. An automated signal had appeared on one of the long-range frequencies. He activated the transmission. The display filled with fragments of intercepted communications. Search sectors. Recovery operations. Military coordination codes. Most of it remained encrypted. One phrase repeated often enough to catch his attention. "Priority target." Ryan slowly looked toward the woman. "You are the priority target." She did not deny it. The silence answered for her. Ryan sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "You know, normal people usually come with luggage." For the first time in days, the corner of her mouth moved. "I will remember that." The station settled into a strange routine after that. The immediate dangers seemed to have passed, yet neither of them behaved as though everything was normal. Ryan continued maintaining the outpost. The woman continued recovering. Yet there was a new understanding between them now. Neither pretended she was an ordinary traveler anymore. One afternoon, Ryan found her standing outside for the first time since the rescue. The weather had finally cleared. Endless white plains stretched beneath a brilliant blue sky. Frozen mountains rose on the horizon like carved crystal. The woman stood at the edge of a ridge overlooking the valley below. Ryan walked over carefully. "You should not be out here without a thermal jacket. The cold does not bother me." That sounds suspiciously like something people say right before getting frostbite. She glanced at him. "You worry too much." Ryan laughed softly. Occupational hazard. Together they looked across the frozen landscape. The silence felt different now. Easier. Less guarded. "Why did you become a rescue technician?" she asked unexpectedly. Ryan considered the question. "Because somebody helped my family once." Her attention shifted toward him. "During a storm? Different world. Different situation." He shrugged. "Same idea." The woman remained quiet. Then she asked something that surprised him. "And if you had known who I was?" Ryan looked out toward the mountains. "Would I have left you out there?" She nodded. "No." The answer came immediately. "A storm does not care who you are." For several seconds, she simply stared at him. The wind moved softly across the snow. Far above them, the last of the departing ships disappeared into the stars. And for the first time since Ryan had found her buried beneath the blizzard, the walls she carried around herself seemed to weaken just a little. The truth arrived on the 7th morning. Ryan was repairing an exterior sensor tower when the station alarms activated without warning. Not emergency alarms. Identification alarms. Every monitor across the outpost lit up simultaneously. Automated systems began pulling data from orbit. Ryan climbed down from the maintenance platform and hurried inside. Snow crunched beneath his boots. Cold air followed him through the airlock. By the time he reached the control room, the main display was already filled with information. Hundreds of encrypted files were flooding local networks. Military channels. Fleet communications. Intelligence bulletins. One image appeared repeatedly across every screen. Ryan stopped walking. The woman from the medical bay stared back at him from the display. The photograph showed her wearing intact armor unlike anything he had seen before. Rows of medals decorated the uniform. Behind her stood an entire formation of warships. A title appeared beneath the image. Commander Lysra Vane, Supreme Strategic Commander of the Aurelis Expeditionary Fleets. Ryan read the words twice. Then a third time. "You have got to be kidding me." A second file opened automatically. Historical records followed. Military victories. Rescue operations. Defensive campaigns. Diplomatic interventions. The list continued for pages. Commander Lysra Vane was not simply important. She was legendary. Across multiple star systems, her name appeared in military academies, historical archives, and strategic studies. Ryan slowly sat down. His memory immediately replayed every conversation they had shared, every argument, every sarcastic comment, every moment he had told her to stay in bed and follow medical instructions. The realization was almost funny. Almost. Footsteps sounded behind him. Ryan turned. Lysra stood in the doorway. For a moment, neither spoke. The control room felt unusually quiet. Finally, Ryan looked back toward the display. "Commander?" She nodded once. There was no point denying it anymore. Ryan stared at her. "You could have mentioned that." "You never asked." "I asked a lot of questions." A faint smile appeared. "Not that one." Ryan shook his head in disbelief. Yet strangely, nothing about her seemed different. The title was larger. The history was larger. But the person standing in front of him remained the same woman who complained about medical scanners and corrected generator repairs. "So let me understand this," Ryan said. "Half the fleet was searching for you. More than half. That does not make me feel better." Lysra looked toward the snow-covered landscape beyond the windows. "I never wanted you involved. Little late for that." The smile returned briefly, then disappeared. For the first time since she arrived, genuine emotion crossed her face. "Gratitude. You saved my life, Ryan." The room fell silent. Outside, pale sunlight reflected across the frozen plains. Inside, the enormous weight of her identity finally settled between them. Yet something unexpected happened. It changed nothing. Ryan still saw the woman he had carried through a blizzard. Not the medals. Not the legends. Not the titles. Lysra seemed to realize that too. And for the first time in many years, the greatest warrior in the Empire looked relieved. The fleet arrived at dawn. Ryan saw it first on the orbital display. What had once been a handful of distant contacts became hundreds. Then hundreds became thousands. Warships filled the projection until the planet itself nearly disappeared beneath layers of tactical icons. The rescue station had never seen traffic like this. Neither had the world. Outside, pale sunlight reflected across endless snowfields while an armada descended from orbit with perfect precision. Ryan stood in silence. Lysra stood beside him. Unlike Ryan, she did not look surprised. She looked tired. "How many ships is that?" Ryan asked. "Too many. That is not a number." "I know." The station speakers activated moments later. A calm voice echoed through every room. "Attention surface personnel. Aurelius High Command has established communication. Commander Lysra Vane is requested to identify herself immediately." Ryan glanced sideways. "Requested?" Lysra's expression remained unchanged. "They are being polite." The transmission repeated twice more. Finally, she stepped toward the main console. Her hand moved across the controls. A secure channel opened instantly. The reaction was immediate. Every encrypted fleet network acknowledged her presence simultaneously. Ryan watched dozens of command indicators change color at once. The effect resembled a galaxy holding its breath. Then every ship in orbit transmitted the same response. "Recognition confirmed." The words appeared across every screen. Ryan stared. "That is absurd." "Yes. They really were looking for you." "Yes." A second transmission arrived moments later. This time the display showed the interior of a command vessel. Rows of officers stood at attention. None spoke. None moved. At the center stood a silver-haired admiral wearing enough decorations to cover half his uniform. The moment he saw Lysra, he lowered his head. Every officer behind him did the same. Ryan felt the room become very quiet. "Commander," the admiral said, "the fleet is relieved to see you alive." Lysra nodded once. "Report." The next several minutes sounded less like a conversation and more like the continuation of a story Ryan had entered halfway through. Search operations. Recovery efforts. Diplomatic concerns. Entire sectors mobilized. Multiple governments contacted. The scale was impossible to comprehend. Ryan listened from the side of the room. Piece by piece, the reality settled in. The woman he had pulled from the snow was not simply respected. Entire civilizations had altered plans because she disappeared. Entire fleets had crossed interstellar distances searching for her. Yet none of that matched the person he knew. The person who complained about medical scanners. The person who read books beside the station fireplace. The person who still owed him a repaired thermal jacket. Eventually, the transmission ended. Silence returned. Outside, hundreds of ships glittered against the darkness above the planet. "Well," Ryan said finally, "that explains a few things." Lysra actually laughed. A real laugh. Brief but genuine. Then her expression softened. She looked around the small rescue station. The maintenance tools. The medical equipment. The observation window overlooking the frozen plains. For a moment, she seemed reluctant to leave. "Ryan." "Yeah." Her violet eyes met his. "Most people see the commander." Ryan shrugged. "I noticed." She looked toward the orbiting fleet. "You did not." Outside, thousands of military personnel waited for orders from the most celebrated warrior in the Empire. Inside the station, Ryan simply saw the woman he had carried through a blizzard. And somehow, that mattered more than any title. 3 days later, the fleet was still in orbit. Thousands of ships remained suspended above the frozen world like a second constellation. Yet the rescue station below had returned to something resembling normal life. Sensor maintenance still needed attention. Weather arrays still required calibration. The snow still drifted endlessly across the plains. Ryan preferred it that way. The universe felt easier to understand when something was broken and needed fixing. Unfortunately, normal life became difficult when one of the most famous military figures in the galaxy occupied your spare room. The departure orders finally arrived at sunrise. Ryan found Lysra standing outside the station watching the horizon. Fresh snow covered the landscape. The sky glowed pale gold where the distant sun touched the mountains. Beyond the atmosphere, hundreds of engines sparkled like stars. "They are ready," she said quietly. Ryan nodded. "I figured." Neither spoke for a while. The wind moved gently across the frozen valley. The silence felt familiar now. Comfortable. "You should probably get going," Ryan said eventually. Entire fleets tend to become impatient. A faint smile appeared. They have waited longer. Ryan looked toward the orbiting armada. That is still ridiculous. The smile widened slightly. For a moment, she looked less like a legendary commander and more like the woman who argued with medical scanners. Then a transport descended from the sky. The vessel settled onto the ice several hundred feet away. Its arrival stirred clouds of snow across the valley floor. The boarding ramp lowered. Officers emerged and immediately stopped. Every one of them stood perfectly still, waiting, respectful. Not a single person approached without permission. Ryan noticed that. So did Lysera. You see, she said softly. They only see the commander. Ryan looked at her. That sounds exhausting. The answer surprised a laugh out of her. Nearby officers pretended not to notice. Ryan suspected none of them had ever heard that sound before. Lysera turned toward the transport, then stopped. There is something I need to do first. Before Ryan could ask what she meant, she activated a portable communication device. Instantly, hundreds of fleet channels opened across the orbiting armada. Massive displays illuminated command decks throughout the fleet. Thousands of officers appeared across linked networks. The commander stood silently for a moment. Then she spoke. You have all asked how I survived. Every voice channel became silent. Even the wind seemed quieter. Lysera looked toward Ryan. The answer is simple. Ryan immediately knew he was not going to enjoy where this was heading. A human found me. She continued before he could protest. He did not know my rank. He did not know my reputation. He did not know my history. The fleet remained silent. He saw an injured stranger and opened a door. Ryan stared at the snow. Anywhere but the communication display. Unfortunately, there was nowhere to hide. The Empire remembers victories, Lysera said. I remember kindness. The transmission ended. Silence followed. Then, one by one, officers throughout the fleet raised their hands in formal salute. Thousands of them. Across hundreds of ships. Ryan looked up slowly. The sight was impossible. Embarrassing. Completely undeserved. Beside him, Lysera smiled. The transport engines began warming for departure. Snow drifted across the frozen plain. Above them, an Empire waited. Yet before she left, the greatest warrior in the Empire looked not toward the fleet, but toward the small rescue station where someone had simply decided that no one deserved to die alone in the cold.